hunted like prey. The Apache woman had no hope until one cowboy stood against it. The sun hung low over the desert, painting the rocky landscape in shades of red and gold. The air was dry and hot, and the wind carried the faint scent of dust and sagebrush. In this harsh land, life was never easy. But for Nawa, an Apache woman in her mid-20s, it had become something far more dangerous than the natural hardships of the desert. Every day felt like a battle for survival, not just against the unforgiving environment, but against people who saw her and her people as targets to be hunted. Mayawa had grown up hearing stories of raids and attacks, stories that were meant to teach caution, but now filled her every thought with fear. Her mother had taught her how to move silently through the brush, how to find water in hidden streams, and how to tell the difference between the tracks of a friend and those of an enemy. Her father had shown her how to make traps and hideouts, how to read the signs of approaching danger. These lessons had kept her alive in the past, but now, as the violence against her people escalated, they seemed barely enough. Her village was small, tucked away between rocky hills that provided some natural protection, but even here, safety was never guaranteed. The Apache community had been fragmented by continuous attacks. Families who once lived close together now stayed apart, hiding in separate areas to reduce the chances of being discovered. Trust was a rare commodity. Every visitor, every stranger could carry threats disguised as help. Nawa had learned this lesson early in life. She knew how to smile politely while hiding suspicion behind calm eyes, how to speak without giving away information, and how to retreat into the shadows when a situation seemed unsafe. This morning Nawa awoke before the sun had fully risen. The desert was quiet, but she felt a restless tension in the air, a feeling that danger could appear at any moment. She stepped outside her small dwelling, a structure of clay and wooden beams, and scanned the horizon. The hills were still cloaked in shadows, and the wind whispered through the scrub. It was peaceful at first glance, but Nawa had learned that the desert could change from calm to deadly in minutes. She could sense the presence of the hunters before she ever saw them. Nawa's family had already left for the day, moving toward hidden water sources and safer grazing areas for their animals. She lingered behind, performing routine checks around the village, making sure traps were set and that weak points in the village's defenses were reinforced. Her hands were skilled and precise, accustomed to the tasks that had become part of daily survival. Every nail hammered, every bundle of sticks arranged, every watchful glance at the horizon was part of a ritual of life in a world that offered little mercy.
As she worked, Nawa's thoughts drifted to her younger brother, who had a tendency to wander farther than he should.
He was clever and fast, but naive in ways that made her heart ache. The thought of losing him or anyone in her family to the hunters was unbearable. Best, she remembered a story her father had told her about an Apache scout who had narrowly escaped capture by using only his knowledge of the land. The scout had vanished into the desert, leaving his pursuers behind. Nawa wished she could believe in such certainty, in such a guarantee of safety, but the desert had taught her that hope was fragile. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed higher, and the heat began to press down on the village. Nawa paused to drink from a small water skin she carried, feeling the cool water soothe her parched throat. The desert was merciless, and water was always scarce, deep. Each drop she drank was precious, just as every moment of safety was precious. She glanced around once more, listening carefully for any unusual sounds. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the distant cry of a bird, the whisper of the wind through the rocks. All of these could hold clues to what was happening beyond her sight. And then she heard it, a faint rustle that did not belong. Her body tensed immediately, instincts honed over years of living in fear kicking in. She crouched low, moving silently toward the nearest rocky outcrop, keeping her eyes on the source of the sound, breath. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to remain calm. Panic was dangerous. It was what hunters counted on. Those who moved hastily or gave away their presence rarely survived. From her vantage point behind a boulder, Nawa spotted movement. A small group of men, unfamiliar and armed, were making their way through the hills. They were careful, but not cautious enough. Their eyes scanned the landscape. Their fingers rested on the weapons at their sides. Nawa recognized the signs of bounty hunters, men who sought profit through violence, who had no interest in mercy or justice.
Her stomach tightened as she realized that they were heading toward her village. She had only moments to decide what to do.
Yes. Should she warn the others and risk drawing attention, or should she remain hidden and prepare for what might come? Every option carried danger. Nawa chose to act swiftly but quietly. She moved toward her home, gathering what small items could be carried easily. Water, dried food, a few personal belongings, and prepared to retreat to a hidden area she had discovered earlier in the hills. Her mind raced, recalling the secret paths, narrow crevices, and hidden caves that had kept her alive during previous attacks. Even as she planned, fear threatened to overwhelm her. The hunters were not far off now. She could see their shadows stretching across the ground, hear their voices carried faintly by the wind. Her breathing remained steady, a skill learned through necessity, as she crept silently toward safety. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated to avoid detection. She knew that discovery could mean death, not just for her, but potentially for anyone else nearby. As she reached the entrance to the hidden path, she paused for one last glance at her village, the homes she had known since childhood, the people she loved, the life she had fought to preserve, all were under threat. The feeling of helplessness was sharp, but it was tempered by determination. Nawa had survived this long by using her intelligence and courage. She would not let fear paralyze her now. She stepped into the shadowed path, moving into the safety of the hills, but with the knowledge that her life would never be the same again. The desert around her seemed both alive and indifferent. Every rock, every tree, every shadow could either protect her or betray her. Best. She pressed forward, aware that each sound she made could be noticed, that every pause could give her away. Hours passed as she navigated the terrain, relying on memory, instinct, and skill. But she thought of her family, of the stories her parents had told her, of the resilience that had been passed down through generations. These thoughts gave her strength, even as exhaustion and fear threatened to weigh her down. By late afternoon, Nawa found a small, secluded cave where she could rest without fear of immediate discovery. She settled inside, careful to keep her movements minimal, and allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The reality of the situation pressed down on her. The hunters were still out there, and her village was vulnerable. But for now, she was safe. But she could plan her next move, think through her options, and prepare for whatever came next. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Nawa sat quietly in the cave, reflecting on the life she had lived and the challenges ahead. But she knew that fear would always be a part of her world, but so would courage, cunning, and the will to survive. Each day was a test, each moment a chance to prove herself. And though the shadows of danger loomed large, she resolved to face them with determination.
In a land where hope was scarce, Nawa clung to the belief that survival was possible even in the face of relentless pursuit.
The desert night settled in, cool and silent, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote or the rustle of leaves. Nawa remained alert, her senses attuned to every sound and movement. Though hunted and alone, she was not defeated. Each day she survived was a victory, each careful step a testament to her resilience. And as the stars began to glitter overhead, she allowed herself a quiet thought. She would not go down without a fight, and perhaps, somewhere in the world beyond the hills, there might be someone who could help her in ways she could not yet imagine. The morning light barely touched the tops of the desert hills when Nawava stirred from her restless sleep in the small cave. The night had been long, filled with the strange sounds of the desert, distant howls, the shuffle of unseen creatures, and the whisper of wind over the rocks. But above all, she had slept lightly, aware that danger was never far away. The hunters she had glimpsed yesterday were still out there somewhere, moving through the hills with their eyes and ears searching. Every instinct in her body told her that she had little time before they discovered what remained of her village, or her. She stepped outside the cave cautiously, her bare feet feeling the cool morning sand. The desert looked calm, almost peaceful, but she knew better. The vast open land could hide threats in plain sight. Nawa scanned the horizon, noting the hills, the shadows, and the rocky outcrops that might give her cover. She had to move carefully, but she also needed to check whether anyone from her village had survived the initial attack. Perhaps her mother, father, or younger brother had escaped into the hills as well. The thought of them both terrified and strengthened her. She could not give in to despair. Not yet. Nawa followed a narrow path through the rocks, stepping quietly and watching for footprints in the dusty ground. The tracks of the hunters were still visible, crude and heavy against the softer soil, evidence of their passage from the day before. She studied them closely, recognizing the direction they had taken. They were methodical, moving with a cruel patience, and that knowledge made her pulse quicken. They had already destroyed her home and scattered her people. It was only a matter of time before they found the hiding places she knew so well. Despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her, Nawa pressed forward. She moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her senses alert. Every sound, the distant call of a bird, the crack of a branch under a rock, the whisper of the wind, was significant. She imagined the hunters ahead, their voices low, their eyes scanning for movement. She tried to anticipate their strategy, thinking like them, so she could avoid detection. This mental exercise gave her a small sense of control in a situation that otherwise felt uncontrollable. Hours passed as she navigated the treacherous landscape. The desert sun climbed high, and the heat became nearly unbearable. Sweat ran down her back and burned her eyes, but she refused to stop. She carried a small water skin, but the desert's thirst was relentless, and she rationed each drop carefully. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she had little time to find food. Survival now depended on staying out of sight, moving silently, and thinking clearly. She had already survived by relying on these skills, and she would need them more than ever today. As Nawa crested a ridge, she caught sight of a small clearing below. Her heart sank. Signs of movement, smoke rising faintly from a distant fire, and the glint of metal in the sun, told her that the hunters were nearby. They were not just searching blindly. They were organized, experienced, and relentless. Nawa ducked behind a large boulder, watching them carefully. She realized that she had underestimated how quickly they could move across the terrain. Every moment she lingered in one place was dangerous. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. Her mind worked quickly. She thought about the caves and crevices she had used in the past to escape danger. Breaths, narrow passages between rocks, and small hollows that could serve as temporary shelters. She could use the desert itself as her ally, hiding in plain sight among its harsh beauty. She began to move again, shifting from shadow to shadow, careful to keep the hunter's sightlines behind her. Her movements were silent and precise, almost like a dance with the land itself. But the hunters were not entirely ignorant. Their sharp eyes caught signs of her passage: disturbed sand, broken twigs, faint footprints. Nawa felt a surge of anxiety. One mistake, one wrong step could give her away. She slowed even further, crouching low when necessary, pausing to listen. She could hear their voices occasionally, low and commanding, with hints of frustration. They were aware that someone had eluded them and their patience was beginning to show cracks. This realization gave Nawa hope. They were skilled, but no one was perfect. Even the most careful hunters could be tricked by someone who knew the land better than they did. Midday arrived, and the sun blazed overhead. Nawa found herself in a narrow canyon, its walls providing shade but also trapping the heat in strange ways. She rested briefly, drinking from her water skin, careful to conserve her energy. She could hear the hunters moving in the distance, their boots clanging against rocks, their voices growing louder as they grew frustrated. The canyon was a dangerous place, but it also gave her a strategic advantage. If she could lead the hunters into unfamiliar terrain, she could create opportunities to escape. She thought of her father's lessons, the stories of her people using the land to survive against overwhelming odds. Her mind worked furiously. She had to think ahead. If she moved too quickly, she risked detection. If she waited too long, she might be trapped. She considered every detail, the direction of the sun, the slope of the hills, the patterns of shadows, and the availability of water. Survival was not just about hiding. It was about using the environment wisely, anticipating the movements of others, and remaining calm under pressure. Each decision carried weight. Each choice could mean life or death. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Nawa spotted a small stream running through the rocks. It was a rare gift in the desert, a chance to drink more freely and even refill her water skin, but she knew she had to be careful. Hunters often knew where water sources were, and waiting too long at one spot could be deadly. She approached slowly, scanning the surroundings, listening for any sign of movement. When she was certain it was safe, she knelt and drank, feeling the cold water revive her body and sharpen her senses. She refilled her water skin, then moved on, careful to cover her tracks as best she could. The hunters were growing bolder. She could see their dust clouds in the distance, hear their frustrated shouts, and know that they had realized she was ahead of them. Chest tightened. She had managed to evade them for hours, but the pursuit was far from over. She needed a plan that would buy her more time, perhaps even allow her to lose them completely. Nawa remembered a trick her mother had taught her, using false trails to mislead pursuers. She carefully disturbed the sand in one direction while she slipped into another, leading the hunters away from the hidden caves she knew. Nightfall approached, and the desert became cooler but no less dangerous. Nawa found a sheltered area beneath a rocky overhang and settled in for the night. She kept watch, alert to the slightest sound. The hunters had not yet caught her, but she could feel their presence, like a shadow over the land. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of her village burning in the faces of her family. She woke frequently, listening to the night, ready to move at a moment's notice. Despite the fear, Nawa felt a strange determination growing within her. Each step she had taken, each careful decision had allowed her to survive another day. She realized that she was not just running from danger. She was learning, adapting, and becoming stronger. The desert, harsh as it was teaching her lessons that no one else could. She understood that survival required courage, patience, and a keen understanding of the land. It was not enough to hide. She had to think, anticipate, and act with purpose. As dawn approached again, Nawa rose quietly, her body weary, but her spirit alert. She knew that the hunters were still searching, but she had already outsmarted them once. She moved through the desert with careful precision, using every skill her parents had taught her and every instinct she had honed over years of living in fear. The desert stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and deadly, filled with both danger and opportunity. And in that vast, unforgiving landscape, Nawa realized that she would not simply be a victim. She would fight for her life, for her family, and for the chance to survive. With the rising sun behind her, she stepped onto the open sand, blending with the shadows, ready to face the relentless hunters once more. The day ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and risks, but she was no longer just hiding. She was learning, planning, and growing stronger with every step. The desert was harsh, the hunters were relentless, and her hope was fragile, but Nawa's courage was beginning to shine. Nawa had been moving through the desert for hours, keeping to the shadows, her eyes constantly scanning the rocky hills and narrow canyons around her. The sun was climbing high, and the heat pressed down with a weight that made every step more exhausting. Her water was low and her stomach ached from hunger. But she refused to stop. She could not allow herself to be caught by the hunters who had destroyed her village. She had survived so far because she trusted her instincts, and she would continue to trust them. As she rounded a small bend in the canyon, she froze, breath. There, not far ahead, a figure appeared in the desert haze. A man was riding slowly across the sand, leading his horse carefully through the rocky terrain. He was dressed in worn clothes, a wide-brimmed hat shading his face from the sun, and he carried a rifle slung loosely across his back. Nawa's heart beat faster. She did not know if this stranger was friend or foe. The hunters were nearby, and any movement could reveal her location. Bias. She crouched behind a boulder, watching him carefully. The man seemed cautious, scanning the hills and valleys as he rode. But there was something different about him. He did not carry the same air of cruelty that the hunters had. His movements were deliberate, but not threatening. Nawa studied him, trying to judge whether he could be trusted. She remembered the stories of her people. Not every stranger in the desert brought danger. Sometimes help came in the most unexpected forms. The man dismounted near a small stream, tying his horse to a rock. He moved quietly, bending down to drink from the water. But Nawa noticed the careful way he avoided disturbing the sand too much, the respect he seemed to show the land around him. She realized that he was not like the hunters. Perhaps he was alone, traveling, searching for something. Or perhaps, like her, he was just trying to survive.
Nala considered her options.
She could move on, continue hiding, and avoid him entirely. That would be the safest choice. But something in her gut told her to watch him closely. Maybe he could help her. Maybe not. Despair. Either way, she needed to be sure. She shifted slightly, keeping low, and moved closer to the stream, finding a place where she could observe him without being seen. The man's attention suddenly shifted. He looked around, as if sensing someone nearby, but his gaze did not fix on her hiding spot. He muttered quietly to himself, scanning the desert with a careful eye. Nawa realized that he was alert, aware of his surroundings, and skilled in moving through the harsh landscape. She felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this man could be an ally. Perhaps he could help her in ways she could not manage alone. For the next hour, she watched him carefully. He seemed to be searching, moving slowly and deliberately across the rocky hills. He examined tracks, listened to the wind, and occasionally raised his hand to shield his eyes from the sun. Nawa realized that he was experienced, someone who understood the desert as she did.
She began to feel that, for the first time in days, she might not be completely alone.
As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Nawa made a decision. She could no longer afford to remain hidden indefinitely. The hunters were still out there, and she needed someone she could trust, or at least someone who could help her.
Slowly, carefully, she stepped out from behind the boulder and approached the man, making sure to keep low and move quietly.
Her hands rested near her makeshift weapons, ready to defend herself if necessary. The man noticed her movement immediately. He lifted his hands slowly, showing that he meant no harm. "You don't need to be afraid," he said gently, his voice calm and steady.
I'm not here to hurt you.
Nawa studied him, her eyes searching for any sign of deception, any hint of danger. But there was none. Bay. He seemed sincere, and something in her heart told her she could take a chance.
I'm Nawawa, she said quietly, keeping her voice low.
Who are you? The man gave a small nod. Name's Ethan, he replied. I'm just passing through. I saw you moving through the hills and thought you might need some help. Nawa hesitated. Bay. Trust did not come easily to her, especially after everything she had experienced. But Ethan's calm demeanor and careful movements reassured her. She decided to take a cautious step forward. Over the next few hours, they moved together through the desert, keeping low and avoiding open areas. Nawa noticed that Ethan was skilled and observant, spotting tracks and signs of hunters that she might have missed. He suggested small changes in their path, leading them through hidden valleys and rocky outcrops. But Nawa realized that he was not only experienced in surviving the desert, but also willing to help her, despite knowing nothing about her or her situation. As night approached, they found a sheltered spot behind a rocky ridge. Ethan carefully tied his horse and began setting up a small area for them to rest. Nawa observed him, noting the quiet confidence in his movements. She realized that she could relax slightly in his presence, something she had not felt in days. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a small spark of hope.
They sat together, sharing a small amount of food and water.
Bay. Nawa did not speak much at first, unsure of how much she could trust him. But Ethan seemed patient, understanding that trust needed time. He shared a little about himself, explaining that he was traveling through the desert, helping people when he could, and trying to avoid trouble. Nawa listened carefully, feeling a small connection forming between them. As the night deepened, the desert became quiet and still. The stars glittered overhead, and the cool air was a relief after the day's heat. Nawa felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. She had survived the hunters so far, and now she had someone to share the burden with. She realized that survival was not just about hiding or fighting. It was also about finding allies, people who could help you when danger seemed overwhelming. The next morning, they continued their journey together. The desert was no less dangerous, and they moved carefully, avoiding the tracks of the hunters and using every skill they had to remain hidden. Ethan proved to be a valuable ally, spotting threats and guiding Nawa through areas where she could remain unseen. She began to feel a sense of partnership forming, a bond built on mutual respect and shared determination. During the day, they encountered several signs of the hunters: broken branches, distant footprints, and even the faint sound of voices carried on the wind. Each time, they paused, observed, and adjusted their path. Nawa noticed that Ethan did not panic or rush. He remained calm, thoughtful, and careful, qualities she admired and had rarely seen in anyone outside her people. Slowly, she began to trust him, realizing that he could be the key to helping her survive the dangerous days ahead. As evening fell, they reached a small canyon that provided natural shelter. Ethan suggested they rest, and Nawa agreed, grateful for the safety the rocks provided. They shared a quiet meal, and for the first time in days, Nawa allowed herself to speak openly about the hunters, the destruction of her village, and her fear for her family. Ethan listened without judgment, offering advice and reassurance. Nawa felt a weight lift from her shoulders, realizing that she was not entirely alone anymore. Night settled in, and the desert became cool and quiet. Nawa and Ethan kept a careful watch, knowing the hunters were still out there somewhere. But the presence of another human, someone willing to fight alongside her, made the danger feel less overwhelming. She realized that survival was no longer just about running and hiding. It was about strategy, trust, and courage. And for the first time, she felt that she had a chance, not just to survive, but to fight back. The bond between Nawa and Ethan grew stronger over the following days. They moved together through the desert, sharing skills, knowledge, and stories. Ethan taught her new ways to read the land, to spot danger, and to use the terrain to her advantage. Nawa shared her own wisdom, explaining the secrets of hidden paths, natural water sources, and survival strategies passed down through her people. Together they formed a partnership, each learning from the other, each gaining strength from the shared experience. One morning, as the sun rose over the desert, Nawa realized how much she had changed. She was no longer completely alone, and she was no longer just a victim of circumstance. With Ethan by her side, she felt a new sense of determination and courage. She knew the hunters were still out there, relentless and dangerous, but she also knew that she was no longer powerless. Together, she and Ethan could face the dangers ahead, navigate the harsh desert, and perhaps even find a way to reclaim some of what had been lost. The desert was quiet that morning, almost eerily so. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the rocky hills, and a faint breeze stirred the sand. Nawa and Ethan had been traveling together for days, moving carefully to avoid the relentless hunters that pursued her. They had grown more than allies over this time. They had become a team, relying on each other's skills and instincts. And now they knew that hiding any longer would not be enough. The hunters were closing in, and it was time to take a stand. Nawa crouched behind a jagged rock, watching the horizon. The hunters' dust clouds were visible in the distance, growing larger as they approached. She tightened her grip on a small, sharpened spear she carried, her knuckles white. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. Fear could not guide her actions. Only careful thought, preparation, and courage would keep her alive. Ethan appeared beside her, crouched low as well. His calm presence was a reassurance, even as the danger loomed closer.
"We can't outrun them forever," he said quietly. "We need to make them pay attention to the wrong trail, slow them down, and take advantage of the terrain."
If we're smart, we can survive this. Nawa nodded. She trusted him, and she knew he was right. Running blindly through the desert would be fatal. They needed a plan.
They began by studying the landscape, looking for natural advantages. Rocky ridges, narrow canyons, and hidden depressions in the sand could serve as cover or traps.
Nawa remembered the lessons her father had taught her. How to use the land to hide, how to anticipate the movements of pursuers, and how to prepare ambushes when necessary. Ethan added his own knowledge, pointing out areas where the hunters might stumble or lose their footing, places where the desert itself could aid them. Hours passed as they carefully prepared their defensive positions. They moved rocks to create narrow choke points, set small traps to trip or slow the hunters, and covered their tracks as best they could. Every action was deliberate, every step calculated. Nawa felt a mixture of tension and determination.
The hunters were dangerous, experienced, and relentless.
But so were she and Ethan. They had the advantage of surprise, of knowledge of the land, and of each other's support. As midday approached, the hunters were visible on the ridges ahead. Their movement was slow but methodical. They seemed frustrated, aware that someone had eluded them for days. Nawa and Ethan waited patiently, hidden among the rocks, knowing that the right moment to strike could mean the difference between survival and capture. Each second felt like an eternity, the tension so thick that it seemed to cling to the skin. When the hunters reached the first narrow canyon, Nawa signaled to Ethan.
They moved silently into position, taking advantage of the natural cover around them. The hunter's lead man stepped into the canyon, unaware of the trap that awaited him.
A small rock shifted underfoot, and a carefully placed snare caught one of their horses, startling it. The lead hunter cursed, and the others slowed to investigate. Desperate. Nawa's heart raced, but she remained still, waiting for the perfect moment. Ethan was beside her, his rifle ready, eyes scanning every movement.
Stay low, he whispered. We control the high ground.
She knew that this was their moment. The hunters were distracted, vulnerable, and unaware of the skill and preparation of their prey. It was time to act. They began to move, slipping from cover to cover, careful to remain unseen. The desert, which had seemed like a vast and lonely place, was now their ally. Rocks, shadows, and uneven terrain allowed them to approach the hunters without being detected. Nawa felt a surge of adrenaline, but she forced herself to breathe slowly and think clearly. Panic would ruin everything. Focus would save them. The first hunter stepped forward, unaware of the small traps hidden among the rocks. Bow. His foot caught, and he stumbled, falling to the ground. The others looked up in alarm, but by then, Nawa and Ethan had taken positions above them. From their vantage point, they could see every movement, every attempt the hunters made to regain control. Nawa noticed the fear in their eyes, the realization that the desert could be just as dangerous as the people they were hunting. Ethan signaled for Nawa to act. She moved quickly but silently, guiding the hunters further into the canyon where more traps awaited. Small pits had been hidden with sand and rocks, designed to slow or unbalance anyone stepping into them. The hunters fell into these traps one by one, shouting in frustration and pain, unable to continue their pursuit. Nawa felt a mixture of fear and satisfaction.
She had survived, but she also realized the power of careful planning and courage.
The battle continued throughout the afternoon. The hunters tried to regroup, but the desert itself seemed to turn against them. Loose rocks tumbled underfoot, narrow ledges made footing uncertain, and hidden depressions caught them off guard. Nawa and Ethan moved with precision, striking only when necessary, using the land to their advantage. It was not a fight of strength, but of skill, strategy, and patience. At one point, the lead hunter raised his rifle, aiming at Nawa. She froze for a moment, her breath catching. But Ethan was quicker. He moved between her and the hunter, raising his weapon to force the man to pause. The hunter hesitated, uncertain, and Nawa took advantage of the distraction, slipping behind a large boulder. The close call reminded her that even the best plans could falter if one moment of hesitation occurred. She redoubled her focus, determined not to make another mistake. First, the sun dipping lower in the sky. The hunters were exhausted, disoriented, and slowly realizing that they had underestimated the desert and their prey. But Nawa and Ethan, though tired and hungry, remained alert. They knew that the final moments would determine whether they survived or fell into the hands of those who sought to harm them. Every trap, every careful movement, every decision made during the day now counted more than ever. As evening approached, the hunters were finally forced to retreat. One by one they withdrew from the canyon, realizing that the desert and their clever prey had outsmarted them. Nawa watched them leave, her body tense but her heart swelling with relief. But they were not safe yet, but they had survived the day. She looked at Ethan, who nodded silently. Desp. They had faced danger together and had come out alive, stronger and more determined. The night fell, cool and quiet, with the stars glittering overhead. Nawa and Ethan settled into a small, sheltered area, exhausted but alert. They shared what little food and water they had, each grateful for the presence of the other. Burr realized how much she had learned in just a few days, about the desert, about survival, and about trust. She had faced hunters who seemed unstoppable, and yet, with careful planning and courage, she had survived. Bray. Ethan looked at her with a calm intensity. You did well today, he said quietly. Bet we worked together and we made it through. But tomorrow could be just as dangerous.
We need to stay sharp. Nawa nodded.
She understood the truth of his words. Survival was not a single battle, but a continuous effort, a constant awareness of danger and opportunity. Fight. She felt stronger knowing that she was not alone, that she had someone she could rely on when the world seemed determined to destroy her. The night passed slowly, the desert sounds filling the air. Nawa and Ethan kept watch in shifts, resting when they could but never letting their guard down. Each hour, each quiet moment reinforced the importance of vigilance and preparation. The hunters were still out there, but now Nawa felt something she had not felt for days. Hope. They had survived together, and together they could face whatever came next. By morning, Nawa's body ached, and her muscles were sore from the day's exertions. But her spirit remained unbroken. She had survived the hunters' relentless pursuit, and she had done so with the help of someone who understood both the land and the importance of courage. She knew the desert would continue to challenge them, that danger could appear at any moment. But she also knew that she was no longer powerless. She had allies, skills, and determination, and that was enough to face the days ahead. The desert was calm that morning, the first light of dawn brushing the rocky hills with soft gold and pink hues. Nawa stood quietly, taking in the scene around her. After days of running, hiding, and fighting to survive, the quiet was almost unbelievable. The hunters who had pursued her relentlessly were gone, or at least they had been driven off for now. The wind whispered gently across the rocks, carrying the scent of sagebrush and dry earth. For the first time in days, Nawa allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling the tension in her body ease ever so slightly. She turned to look at Ethan, who had been sitting beside the small campfire they had kept for warmth and cooking. He was quiet, thoughtful, scanning the horizon as always. Nawa had learned to read him like one would read the land. Cautious but observant, patient but ready to act at a moment's notice. He had saved her life more times than she could count, guiding her through the desert, helping her set traps, and standing between her and danger without hesitation. And yet, he never acted boastful or superior. He moved with respect, as though her courage and skill were equal to his own, and in that respect she had grown to trust him completely. "Do you think they'll come back?" Nawa asked softly, her voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and concern. Ethan shook his head. "Maybe," he said. "But for now, they've learned that they can't just follow someone who knows the land. They'll be more careful next time, and they'll be slower." "We've bought ourselves time." He paused, then added, "Time is all we need to plan what comes next." Nawa nodded, understanding his meaning. Survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about preparing for the future, thinking ahead, and learning from every experience. The hunters had underestimated her, underestimated the desert, underestimated what courage and intelligence could accomplish. They had been stopped, not by force alone, but by strategy, by skill, and by the refusal to give up. Nawa felt a quiet pride welling up inside her. Best. She had survived. She had faced danger that would have crushed many others. And she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. The day stretched before them, long and filled with possibilities. Nawa and Ethan decided to move to a safer location, deeper into the hills where the terrain was even more difficult for anyone to follow. The journey was slow and deliberate, every step calculated to avoid leaving tracks, every pause used to observe the land and plan their next moves. Even in the heat of the midday sun, Nawa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had not survived this far to hide indefinitely. She would survive to live, to reclaim some sense of normalcy, and perhaps even to help others who might find themselves in danger. As they moved, Nawa thought about her family scattered during the attacks. She did not know if they had survived, but she held on to hope. That hope had been fragile at first, but now it felt stronger. She realized that hope was not a feeling that simply appeared. It was something cultivated, nurtured by courage, determination, and the support of those you trusted. Ethan had given her more than protection. He had given her belief that survival was possible, that she could continue, even after everything she had lost. By evening, they reached a small plateau overlooking a narrow valley. The view was breathtaking, the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. The fading light painted the rocks in warm oranges and purples, and a gentle breeze cooled the air. They set up a temporary camp, careful to remain hidden but allowing themselves a brief moment of rest. Nawa felt a sense of relief that she had not experienced since before the hunters had arrived. She realized how exhausted she was, not just physically but emotionally. The fear, the tension, the constant vigilance, it had all taken a toll. But now, sitting beside Ethan, she felt a small measure of peace. That night, under a sky filled with stars, they shared a quiet conversation. Ethan spoke of his travels, of the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned about trust, courage, and survival. Paris. Nawa shared stories from her childhood, the lessons her parents had taught her, and the experiences that had shaped her into someone capable of surviving in the harsh desert. They laughed quietly at small memories, but the conversation also carried a weight of seriousness. Each of them had seen danger and had known fear, but together they had survived. That realization brought a sense of connection that neither of them had expected. Sleep came slowly, each moment filled with the faint sounds of the desert, rustling leaves, the distant call of an owl, the occasional whisper of the wind. Nawa kept watch for a while, her senses still alert despite the growing trust she had in Ethan. But when she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed not of fear, but of strength and resilience. She dreamed of her family, her village, and the possibility of returning to a life where she could survive with dignity, not just with caution. The following morning, Nawa awoke with a renewed determination. She and Ethan planned their next steps carefully. They would move cautiously, searching for signs of her family and anyone else who might have survived the attacks. They would use every skill they had learned together to navigate the desert safely. And for the first time in days, Nawa allowed herself to feel a sense of agency, not merely running to escape, but moving with intention, planning a path forward. As they traveled, the bond between them deepened. Ethan's calm presence and knowledge of the land complemented Nawa's intuition and survival skills. She realized that while she had survived many dangers alone, having an ally had changed the way she viewed her circumstances. Danger was still present, but together they were stronger, more capable, and more resilient. She began to understand the true meaning of partnership. It was not just about protection, but about trust, mutual respect, and shared determination. Several days passed as they moved cautiously through the desert. They avoided the hunters' likely routes, took advantage of hidden valleys, and relied on every instinct they had honed. Nawa felt a growing confidence in her abilities, in Ethan's guidance, and in the strategies they had developed together. She realized that the desert, once a place of fear and despair, had become a teacher, shaping her into someone who could face challenges with courage, intelligence, and skill. One afternoon, they spotted smoke in the distance. Nawa's heart leapt with a mixture of hope and caution. Could it be her family? She signaled to Ethan, and they moved carefully toward it, staying low and using the terrain for cover. As they approached, she recognized familiar faces emerging from behind the rocks. Her younger brother, her mother, and a few other villagers. Safe, alive, and overjoyed to see her.
Tears filled her eyes as she ran to embrace them.
The reunion was brief, careful, but filled with immense relief. The sense of loss that had weighed on her heart began to lift. replaced with gratitude and renewed hope. Ethan watched quietly, his presence steady and supportive.
Nawa realized that he had not only helped her survive, but had also helped her return to the people she loved.
She approached him, gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly.
Bess, I couldn't have done this without you.
Ethan shook his head, smiling gently. You did it, he replied.
"I just helped you see the path. You survived because of your courage." The group decided to move to a safer location together, deeper into the hills where the terrain was even harder for hunters to navigate. Nawa felt a sense of determination as they traveled. She knew the danger had not vanished entirely, but she also knew that she was no longer powerless. She had survived the hunters, faced fear and uncertainty, and found allies who believed in her. She had learned that survival required courage, intelligence, and trust, and she had all three. Over the following days, they established a small, secure settlement. The villagers rebuilt what they could, guided by Nawa's experience and knowledge. She helped teach others how to navigate the desert safely, how to hide, and how to prepare for danger. Her courage and determination became an example for those around her. She realized that survival was not just about living for oneself. It was about helping others, sharing knowledge, and creating a future where fear did not dominate life. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, Nawa sat quietly outside her small dwelling, watching the colors of the sky deepen into shades of orange, pink, and purple. Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of water. They shared a quiet moment, the silence filled with understanding and respect. Nawa reflected on everything that had happened, the fear, the chase, the danger, the alliances, and the triumphs. She realized how much she had grown, how much courage and determination could accomplish, and how trust and partnership could change the course of survival. Nawa's heart was no longer heavy with fear. She had faced the hunters, relied on her instincts, trusted an ally, and survived. She had found her family again and had begun rebuilding her life. She understood that life in the desert would always carry challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. She had learned that even in a world filled with danger, courage, skill, and trust could create hope. As night fell, the desert quiet and still, Nawa looked to the stars above. She thought of her parents, her younger brother, her village, and Ethan. She realized that survival was not just a matter of escaping danger. It was about living fully, using one's skills, knowledge, and heart to protect oneself and those one loved. The hunters had been relentless, but they had been stopped. Nawa had survived, and she had grown stronger because of it. In that moment, beneath the vast star-filled sky, Nawa allowed herself to hope, not a fragile hope, but a strong one built from courage, experience, and trust. The desert was still harsh, still unforgiving, but she was ready. She had survived, she had learned, and she had reclaimed a part of herself that no danger could take away. And with that knowledge, she knew she could face whatever came next.